When someone disrespects you, the first impulse you might feel is the need to strike back, to mirror their rudeness with your own, to let them feel what they made you feel. And in that emotional surge, you might think that matching their behavior gives you power. But what it actually does is rob you of your dignity, because the moment you stoop to their level, you hand over your self control, your grace, and the strength that comes from knowing who you are and why you don't need to prove it to anyone. When you react emotionally to disrespect, especially with the same tone or hostility, you become entangled in a cycle that does nothing but drag you further away from your peace and your truth. There is something incredibly powerful about refusing to become what disrespects you. It's not weakness to walk away from a toxic confrontation. It's strength. It takes an enormous amount of inner clarity to say, I will not let this situation define how I respond. I will not let someone else's lack of respect decide the level of integrity I show up with today. Because at the end of the day, how you behave is your responsibility. And just because someone disrespected you doesn't mean you now have permission to abandon your character or your values. You see, the world will constantly offer you opportunities to lose yourself in the chaos of other people's emotions, their projections, their triggers, and their wounds. And sometimes those wounds show up as insults, sarcasm, control, manipulation, passive aggressive behavior. And if you're not grounded in yourself, if you haven't already decided who you are and what you will and will not tolerate, it's easy to slip into reaction mode where you say something you regret, where you act in a way that later doesn't sit right in your spirit, where you look back and wonder if they took a piece of your power because you responded from a place of pain instead of purpose. Not lowering yourself to their level is not about ignoring the disrespect, it's about choosing your response intentionally. It's about honoring your emotions without letting them control your behavior, because anger is a valid feeling, hurt is real, but what you do with those emotions is where your strength lies. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to insult to be strong. You don't need to win a petty argument to feel worthy. Your power comes from knowing walk away, when to stand tall in silence, when to respond with calm clarity that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to fight for your approval or stoop for your attention. The truth is, when you remain composed in the face of disrespect, you not only protect your peace, but you expose their insecurity, because nothing frustrates someone who wants a reaction more than not getting it. They wanted chaos, you chose calm. They wanted control, you chose self respect. They wanted you to mirror their negativity, and instead you stood in your truth with dignity and walked away. And that is far more powerful than any angry comeback you could have given, because it shows emotional maturity, emotional mastery, and emotional freedom. You do not need to match energy that is beneath you. You are allowed to outgrow people who bait you into disrespectful spaces. You are allowed to hold yourself to higher standard, even when no one else is watching. You are allowed to say, I choose peace, I choose clarity, I choose self-worth, and you are allowed to move through this life, not as a reaction to what others do, but as a reflection of who you truly are. And when you do that, when you decide not to lower yourself, when you breathe through the hurt and rise anyway, you become a walking statement that not only demands respect, but inspires it, because nothing is more powerful than someone who knows their worth and refuses to let anyone else define it with disrespectful behavior. One of the most disempowering things you can do when someone disrespects you is try to explain your worth to them. the moment you feel the need to convince someone of your value, you've already handed them a part of your power. Because your worth is not up for debate, it is not a discussion to be had, it is something you prove through words or justification. It is something that lives within you, unshaken, unchanging, regardless of whether others see it, acknowledge it, or respect it. When you try to explain your worth to someone who has already chosen to disrespect you, what you are really doing is they'll change their mind, hoping they'll come around, hoping they'll suddenly treat you better because you've said all the right things. But people who truly respect you don't need to be convinced, and people who need convincing rarely change. There's something deeply exhausting about trying to make someone understand your value, especially when they are committed to misunderstanding you, when they are rooted in their own projections, biases, or insecurities. Their perception of you has nothing to do with your reality. You could be the kindest, most sincere, most talented, most thoughtful person, and if they are not in a place to honor that, they will find fault anyway. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize that disrespect and begin to question yourself. You'll start doubting your intuition, second guessing your boundaries, softening your truth, all to fit into a version of yourself that they are might find acceptable. And that version is a watered down version of you, and you were never meant to be watered down. Explaining your worth sounds like statements that begin with, "I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to be heard," or "I didn't mean to offend you. I was only trying to stand up for myself," or "I'm sorry if I came off strong. I just wanted respect." And while there's nothing wrong with clarifying your intentions, when it's done in search of validation, it becomes emotional labor that often goes unrewarded and unreciprocated. You cannot make someone respect you by softening your stance. You cannot earn their decency by over-explaining your humanity. And you cannot teach someone to value you by tolerating behavior that disrespects you. What you can do instead is own your space without apology. You can walk into a room and decide that your presence is enough. You can speak your truth without dressing it in politeness meant to make other people comfortable. You can set your boundaries without feeling like you need a 10-step presentation. And you can say no without guilt, without justification, without shame, because your worth is not determined by who understands it or agrees with it. It is determined by the quiet knowing within you that says, "I am enough, I am worthy, I am whole," and that knowing is not a performance, it is a presence. When someone disrespects you, they're showing you the limits of their own awareness, not the limits of your value, and it is not your job to expand their awareness at the cost of your peace. It is not your responsibility to fix their perception by bending over backwards. It is not your burden to carry the emotional weight of their inability to treat you with kindness. And if you find yourself constantly explaining who you are and why you deserve, then that is a sign not to speak louder, but to stand firmer, to shift your energy away from proving and into protecting. Protect your peace, protect your standards, protect the sacredness of your self-worth, because the people who are meant to walk with you won't need a persuasive argument to treat you well. They will see your light and rise to meet it, not out of obligation, but out of recognition and respect. And that is the energy you deserve, and that is the only energy you should ever make room for. So don't explain your worth to those who cannot see it, embody it, live it, walk in it, let the rest fall away. Because you never needed to prove what was always already true. One of the most common but damaging things people do when they are disrespected is try to seek revenge. It feels justified in the moment. Because you are hurt, you feel betrayed, insulted, belittled, or unseen, and every part of you wants to make the other person feel what you felt. You want them to know the weight of their words. You want them to feel the sting of their actions. And you want to take your power back by showing them you are not someone to mess with. But what you must understand is revenge is not power, it is a distraction. It is a reaction that keeps you entangled with the very energy you are trying to free yourself from. And in seeking revenge, you may win the moment, but you lose the war within yourself, the war between your highest self and your wounded self. Revenge might give you a temporary sense of satisfaction. You may see the other person stumble. You may hear that something didn't go their way. And a small part of you might even smile at the thought of karma doing its job. But real healing, real growth, real peace doesn't come from watching someone else fall, from choosing not to let their behavior change who you are and how you move through the world. Because every time you plot, every time you stew in anger, every time you let your energy revolve around getting even, you are still giving them space in your mind, your heart, and your spirit. And the truth is, they are not worth that much real estate. You don't heal by hurting back. You don't grow by shrinking to their level, and you certainly don't reclaim your power by focusing all your attention on someone else's downfall. Your energy is sacred. Your time is valuable. Your mental space is meant for your vision, your healing, your journey, not their punishment. Seeking revenge is like trying to clean a wound with poison. It only deepens the damage and keeps you stuck in pain and bitterness. And over time, that bitterness turns inward. It hardens you. It makes you suspicious of everyone. It closes your heart, and you begin to carry the very energy that hurt you in the first place. Choosing not to seek revenge is not a weakness. It is the highest form of self-control. It is maturity, it is wisdom, and it is strength. Because anyone can retaliate, anyone can throw back words, anyone can try to humiliate, destroy someone else, but it takes a truly powerful person to pause, to breathe, to rise, and to walk away with grace and dignity. You don't need to curse anyone. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to play games or manipulate outcomes. The universe is not blind, and time reveals everything. Not happen in your timeline or in the way you imagined, but the truth always surfaces, and the balance always returns. Letting go of the need for revenge doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you remove yourself from the dynamic entirely. It means you no longer allow them to pull you into their chaos. It means you protect your spirit by refusing to become someone you are not, just to teach someone a lesson. Because here's the truth, they will learn the lesson eventually. Maybe not through your hands, but through life, through experience, through the reflection they'll eventually see in the mirror. And by then, you'll be long gone, living a life so full of peace and success that you won't even remember why they mattered. And that is the ultimate revenge: to heal, to rise, to succeed, to be so whole that their name no longer triggers you, their memory no longer weighs on you, and their disrespect becomes just a lesson, not a wound, because you chose to move forward, not backward. You chose elevation over retaliation. You chose purpose over pettiness. And in that choice, you didn't just win, you evolved, and that is something no one can take from you ever again. When someone disrespects you, one of the most dangerous things you can do is stay silent when your voice is needed. Silence can be powerful, but only when it is a choice made from clarity and not from fear. Too often people mistake silence for peace, when in reality it is the slow death of your truth. Being silent in the face of disrespect doesn't always make you noble. Sometimes it just makes you invisible. You may think staying quiet keeps the situation calm, but it often only benefits the person who crossed the line and leaves you carrying the weight of what was never said, what was never challenged, what was never acknowledged. And that silence begins to echo inside you in ways that create self-doubt, low self-worth, and emotional pain. There is a difference between choosing your battles and avoiding your truth. Sometimes we stay silent, not because it's wise, but because we are afraid of confrontation, afraid of being called too sensitive or dramatic, afraid of losing a relationship or a job or someone's approval. But silence in moments that matter teaches people how to treat you. It tells them what you will and won't tolerate. It signals whether your boundaries are firm or flexible. And if you constantly choose silence over your voice, you may find yourself surrounded by people who feel entitled to your space, your time, and your kindness, without ever giving you the respect you deserve. Speaking your truth doesn't mean shouting, it doesn't mean matching someone's disrespect, it doesn't mean becoming aggressive, it means honoring yourself, it means drawing a line, it means standing in your own power and saying this is not okay. It means letting people know that their words, their tone, their actions have consequences. And it means choosing to value your own emotional well-being over their comfort. When you speak up, you interrupt the cycle, you disrupt the dynamic that has allowed disrespect to grow in the shadows of silence. And even if your voice shakes, it is still powerful because it is still your truth. Some people will try to convince you that silence is strength. And yes, sometimes it is, but not when it comes at the cost of your own dignity, not when it becomes the excuse you use to avoid standing up for yourself, not when it's used as a mask to hide your pain, your frustration, or your anger. Strength is not in the silence itself, it is in the decision behind it. And when your silence is driven by fear or self-abandonment, it is not strength, it is suppression. And suppressed truths don't disappear, they fester, they turn into resentment and bitterness, and eventually they explode or erode your spirit. You are allowed to speak up without being confrontational. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to call out bad behavior without being rude. You are allowed to demand respect without apology. And when you do, you teach people something very important. You teach them that your peace has boundaries, that your kindness is not to be mistaken for weakness, that your presence is not a space for their carelessness or cruelty. There will be times when speaking up won't change the other person. They may deny, they may blame, they may gaslight you, they may walk away, and that is okay because speaking up is not about changing them. It's about being true to you. It's about knowing that you honored yourself, that you stood in your worth, and you didn't abandon your voice to protect their ego. And in the long run, that integrity with yourself is far more valuable than any false peace bought with silence. So if you're tempted to stay quiet the next time someone disrespects you, ask yourself, am I protecting peace, or am I abandoning my truth? Am I choosing calm or avoiding confrontation? Am I standing in my power or shrinking from it? And if the answer reveals that you are hiding, speak up because your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and your truth deserves to be heard, not buried beneath the comfort of others, but spoken with courage and clarity that lets the world know you are not someone to be silenced. When someone disrespects you, one of the most dangerous things you can do is let their words define you, because disrespect is never about you, reflection of them, their pain, their immaturity, their lack of emotional intelligence, or their need for control. Yet in the heat of the moment, when someone mocks you, dismisses you, talks over you, belittles you, it's easy to absorb their behavior as truth. You begin to internalize the disrespect and carry it as if it says something real about who you are. You start to wonder if you're actually too much or not enough, if maybe you did something wrong, if perhaps you deserve the coldness, the criticism, the indifference, and little by little, your confidence erodes, not because you aren't worthy, but because you allowed someone else's voice to become louder than your own. We are all vulnerable to this, especially if we grew up being taught to seek validation from others, especially if our self-worth was tied to how others treated us. We begin to measure our value based on external approval, and when the approval turns into judgment or contempt, we start rewriting our identity through the lens of someone else's dysfunction. But here's the truth: someone's inability to see your value does not mean it isn't there. Someone's choice to be cruel doesn't mean you are weak. Someone's rejection is not a mirror of your inadequacy, but rather a window into their own brokenness. And when you stop making other people's disrespect about you, you begin to take back your power. You are not the name they called you. You are not the tone they used. You are not the lie they told about you or the silence they gave you. You are not their bad day, their baggage, their unresolved trauma. You are not what they projected onto you, and yet so many people live their lives trying to outrun the pain of other people's words, trying to prove their worth through perfection, through people pleasing, through achievement, and none it works, because no matter how much you accomplish, if you believe deep down that you are unworthy or unlovable due to someone else's disrespect, you will never feel whole. That's why it's so important to separate who you are from how someone treats you. Your identity is not up for debate. Worthy by birth, you are enough by design, and no one gets to rewrite that, not even someone close to you, not even someone you once trusted, not even someone who claims to know you better than you know yourself. They may have opinions, they may have judgments, but you get to decide what you believe about yourself. And that belief will shape the course of your life far more than any outside voice ever could. When you allow disrespect to define you, you begin to shrink. You silence yourself in rooms where you once felt confident. You walk on eggshells, you lower your standards, you accept crumbs and call it love you. Stay in places that hurt, because you think healing is something you must earn. But when you stand firm in your truth and say, I am not what they called me, I am not how they treated me, I am not their opinion, I am not their mood, you begin to break free from the invisible prison of their words. It's not easy. The path to self-validation is long and requires courage, but every time you choose to believe in yourself, rather than believe the disrespect you've been shown, you grow stronger, more grounded, more unshakable. You stop giving away pieces of yourself to people who haven't earned this. You stop explaining, defending, overthinking, and instead you start showing up as your full self, unapologetic, unbroken, and unbelievably powerful. Let their disrespect be a lesson, not a label. Let it reveal who they are, not change who you are. And remember, the most liberating thing you can do: look at yourself in the mirror and say, their words do not define me. I know who I am, I stand in my worth, and no one gets to take that from me, ever again. Sometimes the reason we continue to let people disrespect us is not because we don't recognize the hurt it causes, but because we're afraid of being alone. We keep people around, not because they deserve a seat in our life, but because we fear the emptiness their absence might leave behind, so we tolerate the snide remarks, the controlling behaviors, the emotional manipulation, the passive-aggressive comments, the dismissiveness, the inconsistency, and the lack of appreciation, and we call it love or friendship or loyalty, when in reality it's just our fear of solitude disguised as connection. But there's a danger in keeping people close, simply to fill space, because eventually their presence does more damage than their absence ever could. We are afraid to be alone. We lower our standards. We silence our needs. We ignore the red flags, because we'd rather have someone than no one. We think their company, even if painful, is better than our own solitude. We confuse attention for affection and tolerance for love. But keeping people in your life who disrespect you, just to avoid loneliness, is like drinking poison, because you're thirsty. Yes, it might satisfy something temporarily, but over time it chips away at your self-esteem.
Your peace, your clarity, and your ability to recognize what real respect and care actually look like. You begin to convince yourself that maybe this is normal. Maybe everyone has to settle. Maybe all relationships come with a little pain. Maybe you're expecting too much. Maybe you should just be grateful. Someone wants to stay, and slowly you begin to shrink. You become smaller, more silent, more compliant, and you abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. And that is the most dangerous kind of abandonment, because it's the kind you justify in the name of connection. And it keeps you stuck in cycles of disrespect because you fear what life might look like without them. But I want you to know that there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone can be sacred. It can be a season of healing, of rediscovery, of building a relationship with yourself that is so strong you no longer depend on others for validation or identity. Loneliness is temporary, but self betrayal can last a lifetime. And every time you stay somewhere, you don't feel seen, heard, or valued. You are teaching yourself that your needs are not important, that your pain is not worth addressing, and that your boundaries are negotiable, and you deserve better than that. You deserve relationships where you don't have to constantly explain yourself, defend your worth, or recover from subtle wounds that come from someone who says they care but never shows it in their actions. You deserve people who meet you with kindness, who hold your heart with care, who speak to you with respect, even in conflict, who make you feel safe, not just loved. You deserve peace, and peace sometimes requires distance, even if that distance feels empty at first. It's okay to let go of people who hurt you, even if they once made you feel good, even if you shared history, even if you thought they'd be there forever, even if they promised huge. Because words, without action, are just noise, and you are not obligated to keep listening, especially when the cost is your mental, emotional, and spiritual well being. Being alone doesn't mean you've failed, it means you've chosen yourself. It means you've decided that your dignity matters more to you than constant damage. It means you are giving yourself space to heal, to grow, to remember who you are and what you deserve. And in that space, you create room for people who will honor you, not out of fear of losing you, but out of genuine love and respect. So if you're holding on to someone, just avoid the quiet. Ask yourself, what is the real cost of their presence? What part of yourself are you sacrificing to keep them close? And is that a price you're willing to keep paying? Because the truth is, peace isn't found in the presence of others. It's found in the presence of yourself. And once you learn how to be whole alone, you'll never again accept being broken with someone else. One of the most overlooked yet damaging things we do when someone disrespects us is pretend it didn't happen. We brush it off, we minimize it, we say things like it's not a big deal, or maybe they didn't mean it, or don't want to make a scene, and in doing so, we invalidate our own feelings, we silence our own truth, and we allow the cycle of disrespect to continue under the disguise of keeping the peace. Pretending you're not hurt doesn't make you strong, it makes you invisible. It sends a message to the other person that what they said or did was acceptable, even if deep down it wounded you. And over time, those little wounds become heavy. They pile up, and you begin to carry pain that was never yours to bear because you never acknowledged it in the first place. We are taught from a young age to keep the peace, to be polite, to turn the other cheek. And while grace is powerful and forgiveness is necessary, there is a fine line between choosing peace and denying your pain. Every time you pretend you're okay when you're not, you betray yourself a little more, and the cost of that betrayal is steep because eventually you don't just feel hurt, you feel unseen, even by yourself. And that kind of invisibility doesn't just affect your relationship with others, it affects your relationship with yourself. You begin to doubt your intuition, you start questioning your emotions, you wonder if you're too sensitive, overreacting, And that internal confusion becomes the perfect breeding ground for more disrespect, because the clearer you are about what hurts you, the stronger your boundaries become. But when you pretend it didn't hurt you, leave the door wide open for it to happen again. There's this fear that if we speak up, we'll lose people, that they'll call us dramatic, or that we'll be labeled difficult or emotional. So instead, we smile through the pain. We change the subject. We try to be the bigger person. And yes, there's strength in choosing grace. But there's also strength in saying that hurt me, deserve that. I won't allow that again. Speaking your truth is not about causing conflict. It's about creating clarity. It's not about being harsh. It's about being honest. It's not about blame. It's about boundaries, and pretending nothing happened when something clearly did is not kindness. It's silence soaked in pain and fear. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to say you didn't like the way you were spoken to. It's okay to draw a line, even if it makes someone else uncomfortable, because your comfort matters too. Your feelings are valid, even if someone else doesn't understand them. And the moment stop pretending is the moment you start healing. You begin to reclaim your voice, your power, and your self respect. You no longer carry the weight of what wasn't addressed. You no longer replay the moment in your mind wondering what you should have said. Because you said it, you stood up for yourself, and that matters more than keeping the illusion of peace. People will treat you based on what you tolerate, not what you say you deserve. And if you keep pretending everything is fine, people will assume it is, and continue behaving the same way. But when you stop pretending, when you face the moment with courage, when you allow your voice to speak for your pain, you shift the dynamic. You take the spotlight off their behavior and place it back on your standards. And that is a powerful transformation. So the next time someone disrespects you and you feel the urge to pretend like it didn't happen, ask yourself, what truth am I silencing right now? What part of me am I protecting by staying quiet, and what part of me am I betraying by doing so? And then choose differently. Choose to speak. Choose to honor your feelings. Choose to stop pretending, because you deserve relationships that are rooted in truth and respect, not illusions built on silence and fear.